The darkening of the cosmos. The universe had always been a place of wonder, of stars that twinkled with the promise of discovery and adventure. But one fateful morning, that vast expanse of light was plunged into unimaginable darkness. The stars, those eternal beacons, began to fade. No warning, no explanation. The cosmic clock had stopped. It started slowly, as things often do. At first, it was just a flicker in the distance, a star here, a galaxy there, losing its brilliance. But before long, the phenomenon spread like wildfire, devouring the stars one by one, until a great shadow loomed over the known universe. No one knew what was causing it. Some thought it was an anomaly, a once-in-a-lifetime event. Others whispered of an ancient cosmic force awakening, one that could snuff out the stars themselves. Panic spread across the galaxy as the inhabitants of countless planets watched helplessly. For millennia, civilizations had thrived under the light of the stars. Now it seemed as though everything they knew was fading into oblivion. The once thriving empires of the Ichthian Federation and the mighty Zixorian fleets began to falter. Fear became the universal language, and no one could say how long the galaxy had before it descended into utter darkness. On Earth, however, fear was not the first reaction. It never was. Commander Cal Harrington stood on the observation deck of the United Nations Space Authority's headquarters, his hands clasped behind his back, staring out of the cold blackness where once there were stars. His jaw was set, his eyes hard with determination. He had seen crises before: alien invasions, political unrest, even the near collapse of the Earth's own governments. But this was something different. This wasn't just a threat to humanity. It was a threat to every living being in the galaxy. The room around him buzzed with hushed voices, as if they were waiting for someone to offer a solution. But Cale knew there was no waiting in times like these. The galaxy had waited long enough. "Commander, what are we going to do?" asked General Leila Voss, her voice trembling. She had led humanity's armed forces through some of their most challenging campaigns, but even she, a seasoned leader, found herself rattled by the sight of the stars fading. Cale turned, his face steady. "We're going to build a new one." The room went silent. The words hung in the air, thick with disbelief. General Voss blinked, as if trying to process the statement. "A new one," she repeated, her tone incredulous. "A new what?" "A new sun," Cale said simply. The room erupted with a mix of disbelief, confusion, and murmurs of doubt. But Cale's voice, though calm, had a ring of certainty to it. He had faced down enemies before: alien fleets, traitors, even the very fabric of space itself. But this was humanity's moment to shine, to prove that no challenge, no matter how impossible, could stand in their way. Across the room, Dr. Celine Thorne, a physicist and one of the foremost scientific minds of the century, leaned forward. Her eyes, though tired from months of research into the mystery of the darkening stars, sparkled with the flame of curiosity. "Commander, you're suggesting," she began, her voice trailing off, as if trying to understand the vastness of what he had proposed. "I'm suggesting that we do what humanity does best. We think outside the box," Cale replied. "We've mastered space travel, harnessed the power of fusion, and built technologies that no other species even dreamed of. Now we'll do the impossible. We will build an artificial sun." The silence that followed was thick, the weight of the idea settling into the minds of those gathered. Dr. Thorne's mind was already racing, calculating, formulating plans. "We could use the technology we developed for controlled fusion. If we can harness dark matter and antimatter, we might be able to replicate the energy generation of a star," she murmured to herself, barely audible. Cale turned his gaze to her, recognizing the spark of possibility in her eyes. "Exactly. We'll combine dark matter, antimatter, and controlled fusion to create a sun, one that will burn bright enough to restore light and warmth to every star system." General Voss crossed her arms, skeptical but intrigued. But even if we can build the sun, where do we even start? We don't have the resources to construct something of that magnitude, let alone the energy to power it. That's where you come in, Cale said, his expression softening slightly. We've built space stations and mining colonies across the galaxy. We have access to rare resources, materials from asteroids, moons, and dead planets. We'll use them. But the real power is in the heart of the sun, the core. The fusion reactor will need to be powered by antimatter, something we've only just begun to study. Dr. Thorne's eyes narrowed as she began to map out the process in her head. If we can stabilize the antimatter and use it as a catalyst, we can spark a reaction that will create a sustainable artificial fusion core. The question is, can we make it stable enough to last? Cale looked at her, unwavering. We don't have the luxury of time. We need it to work, and we need it now. The challenge begins. As Earth's greatest minds and brightest engineers were assembled to build the artificial sun, they worked tirelessly, pulling resources from every corner of the galaxy. Great fleets of mining ships gathered materials, while scientists raced to perfect the fusion reactor. The task was immense, but there was no other choice. Humanity had always risen to the occasion, but this would be their most ambitious undertaking yet. As Kel watched the preparations unfold, he knew that this wasn't just about saving Earth, it was about saving everything. If they succeeded, humanity would become the galaxy's beacon of hope. But if they failed, the universe would descend into an eternal night. And so, the race against time began. The dawn of the artificial sun. The hum of activity in the United Nations Space Authority's command center was deafening. Engineers, scientists, and workers from every corner of Earth labored day and night to bring the impossible to life. The project, codenamed Solum, was humanity's last, best hope to save the galaxy. For days, weeks, and months, it consumed everything. There was no rest. There was no hesitation. The darkness in the sky demanded action, and humanity's resolve had never been clearer. Commander Kel Harrington walked through the bustling command center, his face set in determination. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on his shoulders. The entire galaxy was watching, some with hope, others with suspicion. Many had dismissed humanity as no more than a fledgling species in the grand scheme of the universe, but now they were about to see just how far humanity could reach. Cale passed Dr. Celine Thorne, who was deeply immersed in calculations, her fingers flying over the holographic display. She looked up for just a moment, catching his gaze. There was a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there before, the kind of fire that only appeared when you realized you were about to change the universe. "We're ready to begin Phase 2, she said, her voice steady. "The reactor's core has been stabilized, and we've begun construction on the sun's magnetic field. It'll be strong enough to contain the energy once the fusion reaction begins." Cale nodded, his heart quickening. They had reached a point in the project where there was no turning back. If they succeeded, the universe would be saved. If they failed, all that was left would be the cold, endless dark, a calculated risk. The plan was audacious, but it was the only one they had. Solum was not just a star. It was a symbol of humanity's ingenuity, a testament to their will to survive in a universe that had given them no guarantees. The fusion core, built with a combination of dark matter and antimatter, was the most dangerous component of the entire project. Stabilizing antimatter was no small feat. If the core became unstable, it could ignite the entire structure in a cataclysmic explosion that would devastate the surrounding systems. But humanity was determined. The stakes couldn't be higher. "I've been thinking about the risks," Dr. Thorne said, tapping away at the holographic screen. "We'll need to monitor the core constantly. Any fluctuations, even the slightest ones, could be catastrophic." Cale turned to her, his eyes unwavering. "I know the risks, Celine, but we don't have time to wait for perfect conditions. We need to take the shot now." Celine hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. She had always trusted Cale, and this time, even more than ever, she needed to. Humanity's future was at stake. A galaxy watches. As the Solum project took shape, the galaxy's eyes turned toward Earth. While many species still struggled to adapt to the encroaching darkness, others watched from a distance, unsure of what humanity might do next. Some, like the Ichthian Federation, hoped for success, believing that if humans could create a new sun, it could provide the light and warmth necessary for everyone to survive. Others, like the Zixorians, were deeply unsettled by the idea of a species so small and young wielding such immense power. The Zixorian Empire had always prided itself on its military strength, and for centuries they had been the dominant force in the galaxy. Now, the humans were constructing a sun, something the Zixorians themselves had never dared to attempt. This newfound power could shift the balance of the galaxy, and they weren't sure they liked the idea of that. Emperor Korith, the leader of the Zixorians, called an emergency council. He was a towering figure, a reptilian creature whose presence alone could command attention. He had ruled over the Zixorians for decades, his fleet feared across the stars. But now, the galaxy had a new player, and that player was unpredictable. "They have no idea what they are doing," Korath growled, his voice low but filled with venom. "Creating a sun, it's an act of madness. They may think they can save their pathetic species, but they are playing with forces they do not understand. You underestimate them, Emperor." A voice from the back of the room spoke up. It was General Nix, a respected Zixorian officer who had witnessed humanity's resilience firsthand. "I studied their history. They have a habit of doing the impossible. They may succeed." Korath's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. Deep down, he understood the truth. Humanity was capable of far more than he had ever given them credit for. The final preparations. Back on Earth, the countdown had begun. The fusion core was ready. The reactor was about to be activated, and the energy would flow into the artificial sun, creating a light that had not been seen in this galaxy for centuries. If it worked, the galaxy would be bathed in warmth and hope once again. If it didn't, Kale stood in front of the enormous display, his fingers trembling as he prepared to give the final command. The engineers and scientists behind him were already working frantically to finalize everything. The artificial sun would ignite at precisely 2300 hours Earth Standard Time. "Are we ready?" Kale asked, his voice low but firm. Celine walked up beside him, looking at the display with a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "We're as ready as we'll ever be." Kale nodded. This was the moment. Humanity had always risen to meet challenges head-on, and this time was no different. The stars had gone dark, and they were about to give the universe a new light. "Activate the core," Kale ordered. The spark of hope. The moment the command was given, a ripple of energy surged through the system. The Solum core hummed with life, a deep, resonating sound that vibrated through the structure. Kel's heart pounded in his chest as the energy began to build. Then, with a flash of light so bright it was nearly blinding, the artificial sun flared to life. For a moment, nothing happened. The room fell into a stunned silence as they waited, holding their breath. Would it work? And then, slowly at first, the light began to spill out. It wasn't just any light. It was the kind of warmth that could bring entire civilizations back to life. The light spread outwards, filling the space around Solum, extending its reach to the surrounding planets and systems. The darkened galaxy was beginning to come alive again. The light that had been absent for so long was back, and humanity had brought it. The galactic reaction. The moment the artificial sun, Solum, ignited, its brilliance radiated across the galaxy, a stark contrast to the fading darkness that had consumed the stars. For the first time in years, planets bathed in light. For a brief instant, it seemed as though the universe had come alive again, the deep black void of space beginning to shimmer with the energy humanity had created. But as the light spread outward, the reactions across the galaxy were far from unified. On Earth, The people of the planet erupted in a collective cheer, a moment of triumph. The creation of a sun, something that had been deemed impossible by every other species, was now a reality. The news spread across the communication channels, echoing through the galaxy like a shockwave. The United Nations Space Authority had done the unthinkable. They had rebuilt the light of the stars. Yet, while Earth celebrated, elsewhere in the galaxy, the mood was far more complicated. The Zixorian response. Emperor Korath paced in his grand throne room, the vast holographic view screen displaying the image of Solom in its brilliant radiance. His eyes narrowed, claws gripping the armrests of his chair as he stared at the creation. It was magnificent, but it was also terrifying. Humanity had done something no one had expected, something that threatened the delicate balance of power in the galaxy. Those arrogant humans, Korath muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. They've gone too far. The Zixorians, once the dominant military power in the galaxy, were now watching helplessly as the humans who had only just begun their rise to prominence, had turned the tables. The very thought of one small species harnessing the power of a sun sent chills down the spine of the Emperor. "Are we sure it's stable?" Korath asked sharply, turning to his most trusted general, Nex. The Zixorian general had fought many battles for the Empire, but this was a new kind of war, one fought not with weapons, but with innovation and technology. General Nix stood tall, his scaled face unreadable. "The humans claim it is stable, Emperor. Their scientists are monitoring it closely. The core has not shown any signs of destabilization, and it appears to be emitting a consistent energy." Korath's eyes glowed with a dangerous light. "We cannot allow this. They must be stopped." The Altorian perspective. Across the stars, on a peaceful moon orbiting the Altorian homeworld, General Nix's words were met with far less hostility. The Altorians, known for their wisdom and neutral stance in galactic affairs, had been observing humanity's actions with a more measured approach. They had watched from the sidelines as humans ascended in the ranks of galactic civilizations, amazed by their resilience and creativity. But now, with the birth of the Solom, their perspective had shifted. "I must admit, this is a development we did not foresee," said High Advisor Janar, an elder of the Altorian Council. The species was known for its long lifespan, and Janar, though centuries old, had never witnessed anything like this before. The room was filled with members of the council, their minds both ancient and keen. "Their sun is a marvel," Janar continued, "but I fear it will change the galaxy in ways we cannot yet predict." A young Altorian named Renai, who had served as an envoy to the human colonies, spoke up. "We've known the humans to be resourceful, but this goes beyond what anyone could have expected. They've proven themselves capable of more than we imagined. This could be the turning point for the galaxy." "Or the beginning of a new conflict," Janar countered. "We must proceed carefully. If the Zixorians see this as a threat, it could ignite a war, one that could change everything." The Ichthian Federation's hope. Not all were filled with fear at the creation of Solom. The Ichthian Federation, an alliance of peaceful species known for their agricultural and ecological expertise, saw the dawn of the artificial sun as a symbol of hope, not destruction. Their home planets, once bathed in the light of distant stars, had been plunged into cold darkness. The Ichthian people were struggling to grow crops, sustain life, and keep their fragile ecosystems intact. Now, with the arrival of Solom, their struggles were far from over, but a new opportunity had arisen. "The humans have given us what we have longed for," said Ichthian Ambassador Hel, her 6 eyes gleaming with a mixture of gratitude and awe. "They have given us light. They have given us hope." But Hel was not blind to the complexities of the situation. "We must be cautious," she warned her fellow ambassadors. "While we are grateful, the galaxy is watching. The Zixorians will see this as a challenge to their power, and even our own people are divided. Some see this as the salvation we need. Others fear the price humanity will demand for this gift." The humans' next step. On Earth, Commander Cal Harrington stood in front of the grand display, watching as the light from Solum continued to flood outwards, touching planets and systems that had been left in shadow for so long. The artificial sun was alive, and the entire galaxy could now feel its warmth. But as the galaxy reacted, some with admiration, others with fear, Cal knew that this was only the beginning. The real challenge had yet to come. Humanity had built the sun to restore balance to the universe, but with such power came responsibility. Cal turned to Dr. Celine Thorne, standing beside him, her eyes filled with the same mix of pride and trepidation. "Do you think they'll accept it?" Cal asked quietly, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on them both. Dr. Thorne sighed. "Some will, Commander. Others will see it as a threat. The galaxy is not ready for the kind of power humanity has just unleashed." "We didn't build it for ourselves," Cal replied, his voice steady. "We built it for everyone." But deep down, Cal knew that the universe would not simply accept this gift. The Zixorians were already moving, and the rest of the galaxy would soon follow. Humanity had lit the stars again, but they had also ignited a new era of tension, one that could either lead to unity or war. The test of power. Humanity had done it. Solum, their artificial sun, was now burning brightly in the center of the galaxy. Its light spread outwards, gradually pushing back the dark that had claimed the stars. It was a symbol of hope for many, a beacon that cut through the endless black void. For others, however, it was a looming threat. As the light from Solum spread, Commander Cal Harrington stood at the heart of the United Nations Space Authority's command center, his eyes locked on the holographic display that showed the reach of the sun. Thousands of ships, stations, and colonies around the galaxy were now within range, and the data streaming in was overwhelming. Earth had accomplished the unimaginable, but now they had to face what would come next. "Status report," Cal ordered, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. He knew that the moment of truth had arrived. Solum was working, but there was much more at stake than just providing light. It was about what humanity would do with that power and how others would perceive them. Dr. Celine Thorne was at her post, running diagnostics on the sun's core. "Energy output is stable. The fusion reaction is holding steady. There's a surge in planetary systems as expected. Systems that were once in deep freeze are beginning to warm. But there's been a spike in transmissions from the outer colonies. People are starting to panic, Cal." Cal frowned. "Panic? Why?" "Not everyone sees this as a blessing," she explained. "There's a growing fear that with this kind of power, humanity will change the balance of the galaxy forever." He knew what she meant. The galaxy had long been ruled by larger, older civilizations. The Zixorians, the Altorians, the Ichthians. They had established their own delicate balance of power, and now the humans had just introduced something that could shatter that balance. Solum was not just a source of light. It was a source of power. And power, as the universe had learned countless times, was both a gift and a weapon. The Zixorians prepare for war. Far across the stars, the Zixorians were not celebrating. They were preparing for war. Emperor Korath stood on the command deck of the flagship Virex, the darkened expanse of space stretched out before him. The Zixorian fleet had long been the most feared military force in the galaxy. With the creation of Solum, humanity had stepped into a realm of power they had never dared to enter. Korath's eyes burned with a mixture of rage and fear. "We cannot let this continue. The humans now control the light of the stars. If they choose to, they could turn that power against us, extinguishing our fleet, our worlds. They have given the galaxy a gift, but it is a gift with strings attached. They will expect something in return." General Nyx, ever loyal to his emperor, stood beside him, his face hard as stone. "We've known for some time that the humans were different. We thought their rise would be gradual, that we could manage it. But now they've built a sun. They've defied everything we know." Korath turned to Nyx, his voice cold and commanding. They've crossed a line. No one controls the light of the galaxy except the strong. The humans think they can play with forces they don't understand. They'll learn soon enough that such power comes at a cost. The Ichthian Federation's dilemma. Meanwhile, in the Ichthian Federation, a different mood had taken hold. Ambassador Hell of the Ichthian species watched the transmissions from Earth with mixed emotions. On one hand, Solum was exactly what they needed: light, warmth, and the promise of life returning to their planets. The Ichthian Federation's homeworlds had been gripped by the cold, crops had failed, and entire ecosystems had started to collapse. But now they faced a dilemma. Solum had given them new hope, but it also introduced a new dependence, a reliance on the very power humanity had created. Would the humans, in their newfound dominance, demand control over the galaxy? Would they use Solum as leverage against other species? "It's a beautiful gift," Hell said, her voice reflecting the ambivalence in her heart. "But it's too much power for any one species to hold. What will humanity want in return for this? What price will they ask?" Her fellow ambassadors remained silent, deep in thought. The Ichthian Federation had always prized balance, and now humanity had tilted that balance. They had given a light to the galaxy, but had they also given the potential for darkness? The Altorian reaction. In the Altorian Confederacy, the situation was equally tense. Janar, the High Advisor, had never seen anything like Solum. The Altorians, known for their neutrality and philosophical approach, had always preferred peace over conflict. But now, as they watched humanity's creation from afar, they found themselves questioning everything they had believed about power. Is this truly the gift of peace, or a weapon in disguise? Janar asked, turning to his council. His voice was calm, yet there was an unmistakable edge of uncertainty in it. "I don't think humanity wants to dominate," Rene responded, his tone thoughtful. "They've shown no signs of aggression, only a desire to help. But power changes things. And once you've held it, it's difficult to walk away from it. The question is not if they can handle this power," Janar said, his eyes narrowing, "but whether the galaxy can handle them." A new era of diplomacy. Back on Earth, Commander Kale stood before a series of new transmissions, each one bearing the weight of the galaxy's response to humanity's sun. The Zixorians had begun mobilizing their fleets. The Ichthian Federation had called an emergency council. The Altorians were gathering information. Kale exhaled slowly. This was no longer just about survival. It was about navigating a new, more dangerous path in galactic diplomacy. Humanity had done the impossible, but in doing so, they had drawn a line in the sand. "We're entering a new era," Kale said, his voice low as he looked out at the galaxy. "And the question is no longer whether humanity can survive. It's whether the galaxy will accept us or fear us." Dr. Celine Thorne joined him at the observation deck, her expression just as serious. "They will either see us as their savior or their destroyer. There's no middle ground anymore." Kale nodded. "We've given them light. Now we must see if they can handle it." The war of ideologies. The galaxy had been irrevocably changed. The light from Solum, humanity's artificial sun, continued to spread across the far reaches of space, its warmth touching planets that had long been cold, giving new life to civilizations on the brink of collapse. But the price for this newfound hope was a rising tide of fear, suspicion, and political tension. The balance of power that had existed for centuries was crumbling, and in its place, new forces were taking shape, forces that would define the future of the galaxy. The Zixorian Ultimatum. The Zixorian Empire, led by Emperor Korath, was the first to take action. With their fleets already mobilized, the Zixorians made it clear that they would not stand by it while humanity's power grew unchecked. The Virex, their flagship, cut a menacing silhouette against the void as it moved into position at the edge of the human-controlled systems. "We will make the humans understand that their gift comes at a cost," Korath declared, his voice cold and resolute. His sharp eyes gleamed with the fury of a creature backed into a corner. They will either bend the knee or be crushed. General Nix, his most trusted officer, stood by his side, watching as the fleet assembled. Emperor, we cannot simply attack. The humans have proven their resilience. If we engage them in battle, we may lose more than we gain. Korath turned to Nix with a chilling smile. We won't attack, Nix. Not yet. We'll give them an ultimatum, a choice. The Ichthian Federation's plea for peace. As tensions mounted, the Ichthian Federation, still basking in the warmth of Solum, began to feel the strain of the galaxy's division. While they saw humanity's power as a blessing, they also recognized the danger it posed. They couldn't afford to stand idly by as the Zyxorians prepared for war. Ambassador Hel, speaking to the Ichthian Council, made a plea for peace. We must not allow this to escalate into conflict, she said, her voice tinged with both fear and hope. Humanity has given us what we needed to survive, but we cannot let the balance tip into war. The Zyxorians fear their power, but this is a chance for unity, not destruction. Her words were met with silence. The Ichthians had always been a peaceful people, but now they found themselves caught between two forces, humanity's untested power and the Zyxorian Empire's desire to maintain dominance. Perhaps, Hel continued, we can act as mediators. We must speak to both sides, ensure that the gift humanity has given does not become the weapon that destroys us. But not all in the Federation were in agreement. Some saw the creation of Solum as a sign that humanity had surpassed them. We must not trust them too much, said a more conservative council member. Humanity may be offering us light, but what will they ask for in return? Can we afford to owe them everything? The Altorians take a neutral stance. In the midst of the growing conflict, the Altorians, known for their neutrality, watched with growing concern. High Advisor Janar had always believed in the power of wisdom over force, but he knew that this new power, Solum, could shift the entire galaxy's political landscape. We've watched the rise of civilizations for centuries, Janar mused, his many eyes focused on the glowing holograms of Solum. But never have we seen such a dangerous combination of hope and fear. Renai, his young protege, asked, what will we do? The Zyxorians are preparing for war, and humanity's creation is seen as both a blessing and a threat. How do we remain neutral when everything is at stake? Janar paused before responding. Neutrality may not be enough this time. Renai. The galaxy is changing. We must find a way to protect the knowledge and peace we hold dear without becoming pawns in a war that none of us can afford. Humanity's stand. Back on Earth, Commander Cal Harrington stood at the heart of the United Nations Space Authority's command center. The situation was growing dire. The Zyxorians were preparing to make their move, and humanity had no choice but to prepare for the possibility of war. Dr. Celine Thorne joined him at the observation deck, her face etched with worry. Cal, if the Zyxorians come for us, we won't be able to stop them. Their fleets are vast. They won't hesitate to use Solum as a reason to destroy us. Cal's jaw tightened, but his resolve was unshaken. I didn't build this sun for war, Celine. I built it to save us all. But if they want war, they'll get it. We'll show them that humanity won't be pushed around. Celine took a deep breath. What do we do now? Cal turned to her, his eyes hard. We stand our ground. We'll make it clear that humanity will not bow down to anyone. The galaxy needs us. Solum is the future. We are the future. And if they want to fight for control, we'll give them a war they'll never forget. The Zyxorian ultimatum. It didn't take long for the Zyxorians to make their move. A fleet of warships, led by the Virex, emerged from the shadows of a distant system, positioning itself at the edge of human territory. Emperor Korath's voice boomed across the galaxy, transmitted through every communication channel. To the humans, the Ichthian Federation, and the Altorians, you have been given a gift, one that you do not understand. Solum is a power that no species should wield. We, the Zixorians, demand that you relinquish control of this artificial sun. You will either bend to our will, or we will destroy you. Choose wisely." The galaxy held its breath. War had come to their doorstep. A galaxy on the brink. Humanity stood at a crossroads. The artificial sun they had created was both their triumph and their burden. The Ecthean Federation was torn between alliance and fear, while the Altorians struggled with their commitment to neutrality in a galaxy that had lost its balance. The Zixorians, with their fleets at the ready, made it clear that they would not tolerate humanity's growing power. And as Commander Kale stood before his team, preparing for the ultimatum from the Zixorians, he knew that the galaxy was about to change forever. What had started as a hope for survival had become a war of ideologies. It was no longer just about light or darkness. It was about control, about the future. Humanity's greatest creation had lit the stars again, but now it might also ignite a war that could consume them all. The battle for the future. A galaxy had held its breath when the Zixorians issued their ultimatum. And now it seemed the galaxy was on the brink of war. The weight of the situation pressed down on every faction. Each species was faced with a stark choice. Would they stand with humanity, or would they cower before the might of the Zixorians? On Earth, Commander Cal Harrington stood at the helm of the United Nations Space Authority's command center, his expression as steely as ever. The Zixorians had made it clear. They wanted Solum gone. The power humanity had created would be taken, or they would face the consequences. "Commander, the Zixorian fleet is advancing," reported Captain Lydia Harris, her voice filled with urgency. "They've entered the outer rim of our systems. They're not waiting for us to respond." Cal's grip tightened on the console in front of him. The time for diplomacy was over. The moment of truth had come. "Prepare our fleets. The Zixorians want to fight. They'll get one," Cal ordered. His voice echoed in the room, commanding every officer present to follow through with the weight of his words. Dr. Celine Thorne, ever the calm and logical mind, stepped beside him. "Cal, we cannot rely solely on military power. Solum is our advantage, but if the Zixorians move in too quickly, they could destroy everything before we can even respond." Cal turned to face her, his eyes dark but resolute. "We will fight to the last, Celine. But we can't let them have it. Solum is not just a weapon. It's a symbol. It's a sign that humanity has risen. We cannot let them erase that." The Ecthean Federation's dilemma. Meanwhile, in the Ecthean Federation, tensions were rising. The Ecthean representatives had gathered in their Grand Council chamber, deep in debate. The Zixorians had made it clear that they intended to destroy Solum, and the Federation could no longer stand on the sidelines. They had benefited from humanity's gift, but now they were faced with the reality of what that gift had become, a flashpoint for war. "We cannot allow the Zixorians to dominate the galaxy again," said Ambassador Hell, her voice steady, but filled with conviction. "Humanity has proven its worth. We have been saved from the darkness they brought upon us. It's time we return that favor." "But the cost?" Hell warned a more conservative member of the council. "The Zixorians are not a race to be trifled with. If we support humanity, we risk everything. Our ships, our worlds, they could be wiped out." Hell's eyes narrowed. "And if we do nothing, we risk losing everything we have gained. The Zixorians will not stop at Solum. They will see every new power in the galaxy as a threat. The time for neutrality is over." A heavy silence fell over the room. For the Ecthean Federation, this was more than just a political decision. It was a moral one. Were they willing to fight for the future, or would they cower in fear? In the end, Hell's voice carried the day. "We stand with humanity. It's time to make our choice." The Altorians stepped forward. The Altorians, once the galaxy's quiet observers, had stayed out of the conflict so far. But the creation of Solum had changed the landscape of galactic politics, and the time for neutrality had come to an end. High Advisor Janar met with his council, a quiet urgency in his eyes. The galaxy is at a crossroads. Humanity has given us light, and the Zixorians have threatened to snuff it out. The question is not whether we support humanity. It's whether we want to live in a galaxy dominated by fear. Renai, younger and more idealistic, spoke up. We have always chosen peace, Advisor Jenner. But now we must make a stand. The Zixorians will not stop unless we show them that peace cannot be taken through force. Jenner nodded slowly. We have kept to the sidelines long enough. It's time to act. Our ships will join the Ichthians in defense of Solum. The galaxy must see that we are united in our resolve. And so, the Altorians, too, declared their allegiance to humanity's cause. The Zixorian assault. In deep space, the Zixorian fleet moved steadily towards Solum, its flagship, the Virex, leaving the charge. Korath's voice boomed once more across the galaxy, a stark declaration of war. Humanity has been given a gift they do not deserve. The galaxy belongs to the strong, not those who play with the forces of the cosmos. Prepare to see the consequence of defying the Zixorian Empire. The Zixorian warships powered up their weapons, their shields rising in unison. They had come to take what they felt was theirs, to bring the universe back into the order they knew. But they underestimated one thing: humanity's resolve. The human fleet, now bolstered by the Ichthian and Altorian forces, formed up in tight formation, ready for battle. Kale stood in the command chair of the flagship Eclipse, his gaze unwavering as he stared at the advancing Zixorian fleet. This is it, he muttered to himself. We either win today, or we lose everything. Dr. Celine Thorne joined him, standing at his side. We've prepared for this, Kale. Humanity was always destined for greatness. Now we must prove it. The battle begins. The first shots were fired with blistering speed. The Zixorian ships, with their superior firepower and ruthless tactics, tore into the combined fleets of humanity, Ichthians, and Altorians. But the humans fought with everything they had, their ingenuity shining through as they used their advanced technology to counter Zixorian assaults. On the battlefield, humanity's ships moved with precision, using their advanced tech to stay one step ahead of the Zixorians. The Eclipse led the charge, weaving in and out of enemy fire, its advanced shields holding strong against the Varage. Despite the chaos, Kale remained calm. He gave orders with a quiet confidence that resonated throughout the fleet. Hold formation. Keep your eyes on Solum. We are fighting for our future, not just for ourselves, but for every living being in the galaxy. The battle raged on, with the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. The Zixorians pressed their advantage, but the humans, bolstered by their allies, fought back with unmatched determination. A new dawn or a darkened future. As the battle raged on, Solum continued to burn brightly in the distance, its light reaching across the galaxy, a symbol of humanity's defiance, of their resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. The universe watched as the clash of ideologies played out. Humanity's fight for survival, the Zixorians' fight for dominance. Would Solum become the light of a new era, or would it be extinguished in the fires of war? As the first phase of the battle reached its peak, Kale stood firm at the heart of the conflict, knowing that the future of the galaxy rested on the choices made today. The final stand. The galaxy was at war, and the light of Solum was its battlefield. The conflict had raged for days now. Humanity's fleet, bolstered by the Ichthian Federation and the Altorians, fought valiantly against the Zixorian Empire, which was determined to seize control of the galaxy's only artificial sun. The stakes had never been higher. Solum, humanity's crowning achievement, was at the heart of the struggle, its light a symbol of hope, but also a powerful weapon. With each passing hour, the conflict grew fiercer, the tide of war shifting unpredictably. On Earth, Commander Cal Harrington stood at the command center of the flagship Eclipse, his eyes focused on the holographic battle map. The Zixorians had underestimated humanity's resilience, but the fight was far from over. The Zixorians were relentless, their fleets pressing hard against the combined forces of humanity, Ichthyans, and Altorians. The battle had become a war of attrition, with no side willing to back down. "Commander, the Zixorians are attempting to breach our outer defenses," Captain Lydia Harris reported, her voice tense. "We need to reinforce the left flank, or they'll cut off our retreat." Cal's jaw tightened. "No retreat. Hold the line. Solum must remain intact. This is not just about victory. It's about the future." Dr. Celine Thorne, standing beside Cal, looked at him with a quiet concern. "We're running out of time, Cal. If the Zixorians push too hard, we won't be able to defend Solum. Once they breach the core's defenses, there won't be anything left to save." "We're not letting them have it," Cal said firmly. "We'll hold them off long enough to win this war. Solum is humanity's gift to the galaxy. It's not just light. It's our message. We will survive, and we will lead." The Zixorian final assault. Far away, Emperor Korath paced aboard the Virex, his mind swirling with rage and desperation. His fleet had suffered losses, but it was nothing compared to the power humanity now wielded. The Virex and its sister ships continued their relentless bombardment, but they had underestimated one key factor: the ingenuity of humanity. Every time they thought they had the upper hand, the humans adapted, using their technology and creative thinking to counter the Zixorian onslaught. The Zixorian Empire was crumbling, but Korath refused to admit defeat. "General Nix, prepare the final assault," Korath ordered. "If we cannot take Solum by force, we will crush the humans' will to fight. Target their flagship. We will destroy the heart of their resistance." Nix nodded grimly. "Understood, Emperor. The eclipse is our primary target. Once it falls, the humans will have no choice but to surrender." But Korath's plan would not be so easy to execute. Humanity had something the Zixorians lacked: the will to keep fighting, no matter the cost. The turning point. As the Zixorian fleet drew closer to the heart of humanity's defense, Cal's voice rang out across the command deck, filled with unwavering authority. "Captain Harris, deploy the prototype weapon we've been testing." "Now," Cal ordered. Dr. Thorne glanced at him, alarmed. "Cal, it's still experimental. We don't know if it will work. We could destroy everything if—" "We don't have time, Celine," Cal interrupted, his gaze hardening. "We can either let them destroy us or take a risk. We can't let them take Solum. It's our future." The weapon, a cutting-edge electromagnetic pulse cannon designed to disrupt the Zixorian fleet's coordination and shields, was humanity's final hope. It had never been tested in combat, but desperate times called for desperate measures. As the Zixorian fleet approached, Cal gave the command. "Fire." The pulse shot out with blinding speed, a crackling wave of energy that swept across the battlefield. The pulse hit the Zixorian fleet with a thunderous impact, temporarily disabling their shields and communications. The fleet was thrown into chaos as their ships faltered, unable to coordinate the assault. The humans seized the moment, launching a counterattack that caught the Zixorians off guard. The final confrontation. Cal's voice was calm as he watched the results unfold. "Keep the pressure on. We can win this." In the midst of the battle, the eclipse broke through the Zixorian ranks, heading directly toward the Virex. The flagship of the Zixorian Empire was now vulnerable, its command systems crippled by humanity's pulse weapon. The final confrontation was imminent. Cal's ship approached the Virex as the Zixorian forces struggled to regain control. He knew this was their chance. Solum would remain, and the Zixorians would see that humanity would not bow to them. On the bridge of the Virex, Emperor Korath watched the incoming human ships, his face twisted in anger, but also in reluctant respect. The humans had outmaneuvered him. Their sun, their power, had proven to be more than just light. It was the heart of a new order in the galaxy. "We've lost," Korath muttered, his eyes darkening. Retreat. The aftermath. With the Zixorian fleet in disarray, the humans, alongside their allies, pushed forward, securing the last of the Ixorian ships. The battle was over. The tide had turned. Kale stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, gazing out at the remnants of the Ixorian fleet. The war had been hard, but humanity had emerged victorious. Solum had held, and with it, the promise of a new future. Dr. Celine Thorne stepped beside him, her voice filled with quiet awe. "We did it, Kale. Solum is safe. The galaxy will see that humanity has changed the course of history." Kale nodded, his expression softening for the first time in days. "We didn't just save Solum. We've given the galaxy a new beginning. A future where power isn't just for the strong. It's for everyone. A new era. With the Ixorians in retreat and their fleet crippled, the galaxy began to heal. The factions that had once stood in opposition now began to come together, recognizing the power and the responsibility humanity had taken on. The Ichthian Federation, the Altorians, and even the most skeptical of species began to look to humanity not with fear, but with respect. Solum remained as a shining symbol of humanity's strength, creativity, and resolve. It was a beacon of hope for those who had lived in darkness, and a reminder of what was possible when determination met innovation. For Cal Harrington, the battle was over, but the real work had only just begun. Humanity had changed the galaxy forever, and now it was time to lead. Conclusion: the dawn of a new age. As the galaxy began its slow recovery, a new order emerged, one led by humanity's example of resilience, ingenuity, and leadership. Solum had not only provided light, but it had sparked the flames of unity across the stars. Humanity had built the sun, and in doing so, had built a future for the galaxy, a future where hope burned brighter than the stars. And in that light, a new age began.